quick like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. My name is Marcus. I'm 38 years old, and I work as an interrogation consultant for a private investigation firm in Dallas, Texas. I train law enforcement and corporate investigators on how to read people, detect deception, and recognize when someone is confessing without actually confessing. I understand linguistic patterns, and I know that when someone asks, "What would you do if?" they're not asking hypothetically. They're preparing you for what they've already done. I never thought I'd need to apply those interrogation techniques to a conversation with my own wife. But when your spouse asks what you'd do if she cheated, and every deception indicator I've trained others to recognize is flashing red, you don't answer the hypothetical question. You ask the real one. My wife, Jessica, asked what I'd do if she cheated. I asked what she'd already done, and the 8 seconds of silence before she answered told me everything I needed to know. I met Jessica 10 years ago at a charity fundraiser in downtown Dallas. She was working as an event coordinator for a nonprofit, charming and social in ways I wasn't. I was the interrogation consultant, trained to read people but not particularly good at casual conversation. She made social situations easier for me. We got married 9 years ago, bought a house in the Lakewood neighborhood, a renovated 1940s home with hardwood floors and a backyard. Jessica continued in event coordination, building her career. I advanced to senior consultant, training investigators across the country. Combined income around $195,000. We were stable, successful, planning our future. For 8 years, everything worked. We had our routines, our social circle, our shared goals. We'd talk about kids eventually, maybe after Jessica's career was more established. Then about 3 months ago, Jessica's communication patterns started changing in ways that triggered every deception indicator I'd ever taught. In interrogation training, I teach investigators to watch for specific verbal patterns that indicate someone is preparing to confess or seeking permission for something they've already done. One of the clearest patterns is what we call hypothetical testing, asking what someone would do in a scenario that's not actually hypothetical. Jessica started doing exactly that. It began small. About 2 months ago, over dinner one evening. "Do you think people can really change their fundamental nature?" she asked. That's a philosophical question. Why do you ask? Just wondering. Like, if someone made a mistake that was completely out of character, would that define them forever? In interrogation terms, this is called moral testing. The subject is gauging whether confession will result in permanent judgment or if there's room for redemption. "I think people are more than their worst moments," I said. "Context matters." She nodded, seeming relieved. A week later, another test question. If someone you loved hurt you, but they were genuinely sorry, would you be able to forgive them? Depends on what they did and why. But theoretically, forgiveness is possible? Theoretically, yes. Again, she seemed to relax after my answer. In interrogation, when someone asks multiple questions on the same theme, change, forgiveness, judgment, they're building a psychological profile of how you'll react to something specific. They're not being philosophical. They're preparing. Then 2 weeks ago, Jessica asked a question that made everything clear. We were sitting on the couch on a Saturday evening. Jessica had been quiet all day, distracted. She'd picked up her phone several times, started to say something, then stopped. Finally, around 8 p.m., she turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She took a breath, what we call a pre-confession inhale in interrogation training. Deep breath before revealing something difficult. "What would you do if I cheated on you?" Every deception indicator I'd ever taught others to recognize activated in my mind simultaneously. The phrasing, "What would you do if I cheated?" Not if someone cheated or if a spouse cheated. Personalizing the hypothetical makes it less hypothetical. The timing. After 2 months of moral testing questions about change and forgiveness, this was the culmination of a preparation process. The delivery, the deep breath, the hesitation all day, the multiple false starts. Classic pre-confession behavior. I looked at my wife and recognized immediately that this wasn't a hypothetical question. This was a confession disguised as a question. She'd already done something and was testing how I'd react before deciding whether to admit it fully. In interrogation, this is the critical moment. You can either answer the hypothetical question, which allows the subject to maintain the fiction, or you can redirect to the truth. I chose redirection. What have you already done? Jessica's face went pale. What? You're not asking a hypothetical question. You're preparing me for something real. So let's skip the theoretical discussion. What have you already done? I'm just asking. Jessica, I teach interrogation techniques for a living. I know what pre-confession behavior looks like. You've been morally testing me for 2 months with questions about change and forgiveness. Now you're asking what I'd do if you cheated, using specific phrasing that personalizes it. You're not being hypothetical. You're preparing to confess. She stared at me, tears forming. So I'll ask again, what have you already done? 8 seconds of silence. In interrogation, we call this processing pause. The subject is deciding whether to continue denying or to confess. Anything over 5 seconds usually indicates confession is coming. I made a mistake, she finally said. What kind of mistake? I got too close to someone. How close? More silence. Shorter this time. 3 seconds. We kissed. Once. 3 weeks ago. In interrogation training, I teach that first confessions are almost always minimized. People confess to the least serious version of what actually happened. You always follow up. Just kissed? Once? 3 weeks ago. She looked down. There might have been more than one time. How many times? I don't know. A few. Over how long? The past 2 months. And it's just been kissing? Nothing else. She hesitated. For seconds this time. We've spent time together. Talked a lot. It's been mostly emotional. Mostly emotional means partially physical. What's the physical part beyond kissing? We've been together a few times. The confession was coming out in layers. Classic pattern. Each admission was followed by more questions revealing more truth. Been together meaning what exactly? We've been intimate. A few times. How many is a few? Maybe 4 or 5 times. Over 2 months? Yes. Who is he? His name is David. He's a client. He runs a tech company we've been coordinating events for. I sat back on the couch, processing. So you've been having an affair with a client for 2 months, multiple times, and you're asking me what I'd do if you cheated. I wanted to know if there was a way forward. You wanted to know if confession was safe, if I'd potentially forgive you before you decided whether to tell me the full truth. That's exactly what you were doing. The questions about change and forgiveness, the hypothetical about cheating, all of it was testing. You've been preparing to confess for 2 months, gauging my reactions, seeing if it was safe. She started crying harder. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. When did it start? 3 months ago. He hired our company for a product launch event. We started working together closely. We just connected. 3 months ago, you started the emotional affair. 2 months ago, you started the physical affair. And you've been testing me for 2 months to see if I forgive you. I didn't know what to do. You knew what to do. You chose not to do it. You chose to keep seeing David while testing whether I forgive you before actually confessing. I stood up. Is it still going on? She nodded, barely. When did you last see him? Yesterday. I told you I had a client meeting. You told me you had a client meeting. You didn't tell me it was with your boyfriend. He's not my boyfriend. He's someone you've been sleeping with for 2 months while married to me. What would you call that? She had no answer. I walked to our bedroom and grabbed my laptop, brought it back down. I need to ask you detailed questions, and I need you to answer honestly. Can you do that? She nodded. For the next hour, I interviewed my own wife like she was a subject in an interrogation, asked specific questions about the timeline, the meetings, the lies she told. Used every technique I'd ever taught to extract the complete truth. By the end, I had the full picture. Jessica and David had met 3 months ago through work. They'd started texting constantly, hundreds of messages over 3 months. They had lunch together twice a week for the past 3 months. They'd started kissing 6 weeks ago. They'd slept together for first time 5 weeks ago and had been intimate 6 times total. The most recent time had been yesterday afternoon. She'd told me she had a client meeting. She'd actually gone to David's apartment. And tonight, she'd been planning to ask me what I'd do if she cheated, gauge my response, and decide whether to confess or continue hiding it. Here's what's going to happen, I said when the interview was complete. I'm filing for divorce. I'll contact an attorney Monday morning. Don't you want to try counseling? No, you've been having an affair for 2 months. You've been lying to me constantly. And tonight you asked me a hypothetical question about something you'd already done. That tells me you're not sorry for the affair. You're sorry you might get caught. That's not true. Jessica, I literally teach people how to detect deception for a living. You exhibited every pre-confession behavior. You were testing whether it was safe to admit to the affair, not because you felt guilty, but because you wanted to manage my response. I do feel guilty. If you felt genuinely guilty, you would have confessed directly. Instead, you asked what I'd do if he cheated. That's not confession. That's risk assessment. She tried to argue, but I'd heard enough. I went upstairs, packed a bag, and called my friend Aaron. Can I crash at your place tonight? Yeah, man. What's going on? I'll explain when I get there. I came back downstairs. Jessica was still on the couch, crying. I'm staying at Aaron's. We'll talk through attorneys. And Jessica, the answer to your hypothetical question is this. I would file for divorce immediately, which is exactly what I'm doing. I left, heard her sobbing behind me. Aaron's place was across town. I drove in silence, my interrogation training running through my mind. The hypothetical question, the pre-confession behaviors, the minimized admissions, the layered confessions, all of it was textbook deception. Jessica hadn't asked what I'd do if she cheated because she was genuinely curious. She'd asked because she'd already cheated and was testing whether confession was viable. Monday morning, I called an attorney. His name was Robert Lewis, specialized in high-asset divorces. Robert, I need to file for divorce. My wife has been having an affair, and I have a detailed confession. What kind of confession? I'm an interrogation consultant. When my wife asked me a hypothetical question about cheating, I recognized it as pre-confession behavior. I redirected, and she admitted to a 2-month physical affair with a client. You got her to confess? I interviewed her using standard interrogation techniques. I have detailed admissions about the timeline, the meetings, the lies, all of it. Did you record it? No, but I have written notes from the interview. Timeline, specific dates, locations, everything she admitted to. That's unusual leverage, Robert said. Most people don't get detailed confessions like that. Most people aren't trained interrogators. When she asked the hypothetical question, I knew exactly what it meant. So I extracted the full truth before she could minimize it. Robert filed papers Tuesday. Jessica was served Wednesday at her office. She called me immediately. You're really filing for divorce? You've been sleeping with David for 2 months. You lied about client meetings. You asked me what I'd do if you cheated after you'd already done it. Yes, I'm filing. I thought we could talk about it. We did talk about it. Saturday night. I interviewed you for an hour. You admitted to everything. There's nothing left to discuss. You interrogated me in our own home. You asked a question designed to test my reaction. I redirected the truth. That's not interrogation, Jessica. That's recognizing deception and addressing it directly. I want to try to fix this. You wanted to try managing my reaction to minimize consequences. That's different from wanting to fix things. If you wanted to fix things, you would confess honestly instead of asking what I'd hypothetically do. Jessica hired an attorney who tried to argue that my interrogation of her had been coercive. Robert shut that down. My client asked his wife what she'd already done after recognizing her question was pre-confession behavior. She then voluntarily provided detailed admissions over the course of an hour. That's not coercion. That's a wife confessing to her husband. Jessica's attorney tried to claim the confession was inadmissible. Robert pointed out that marital confessions aren't subject to the same standards as criminal confessions. This wasn't a police interrogation. This was a husband recognizing his wife's deception and asking direct questions. Her answers are absolutely relevant to this divorce. Jessica's attorney tried to argue for a 50-50 asset split. Robert presented the detailed timeline of Jessica's affair, including her admission that she'd been testing whether confession was safe by asking hypothetical questions. Mrs. Marcus asked her husband what he'd do if she cheated while actively having an affair. Robert argued. That demonstrates calculated deception, not remorse. She was managing information, not seeking forgiveness. That affects how we view property division. We settled after 7 weeks. I kept the house. I'd paid 75% of the down payment from premarital funds. Jessica got 30% of joint savings. We each kept our own retirement accounts. No alimony. 9 years of marriage ended because she asked a hypothetical question that wasn't hypothetical. I heard what happened afterward. Jessica tried to continue her relationship with David. It lasted about 6 weeks. Turned out David had liked the affair, the secret meetings, the excitement, the stolen time. When Jessica was actually available and wanted a legitimate relationship, he wasn't interested. He also ended his company's contract with Jessica's event coordination firm. Didn't want the professional complications. Jessica lost several other clients when word spread about the affair with David. Her professional reputation in the Dallas events industry suffered. She eventually moved to Houston for a fresh start with a different company. She tried to reach out about a year after the divorce. A long email about how I'd manipulated her into confessing, how I'd used my interrogation training against her unfairly. I replied with one line. You asked a question designed to manipulate my response. I simply recognized it and asked for the truth instead. Then I blocked her. I kept the house in Lakewood, made it entirely mine. About 18 months after the divorce, I met someone at a professional training conference. Her name was Nicole. She was a fraud investigator, understood behavioral analysis, appreciated direct communication. On our third date, she asked about my divorce. My ex-wife asked what I'd do if she cheated. I recognized it as pre-confession behavior, so I asked what she'd already done instead. She admitted to a 2-month affair she'd been planning to confess to conditionally based on my reaction. Nicole's eyes widened. She was testing you before confessing? Exactly. She'd been morally testing me for 2 months with questions about change and forgiveness. The hypothetical about cheating was her final test before deciding whether to admit it or continue hiding it. And you redirected to the real question. I asked what she'd already done. She went silent for 8 seconds, which told me confession was coming. Then she admitted to everything. Did you interrogate her? I interviewed her using standard techniques to get the complete truth. Timeline, dates, locations, everything. She gave detailed admissions because she thought I might forgive her if she was honest. But you didn't. No, because the hypothetical question told me she wasn't being honest out of remorse. She was being strategic, managing information, testing whether confession was viable before committing to it. Nicole nodded slowly. In fraud investigation, we see that all the time. People who ask, what would happen if someone did X, are usually telling you they already did X. Exactly. Hypothetical questions are rarely hypothetical. They're confessions wrapped in plausible deniability. We've been together for over a year now. Nicole has never asked me hypothetical questions about forgiveness or trust or what I do in theoretical scenarios. She just doesn't do things that would require those conversations. My wife asked what I'd do if she cheated. I asked what she'd already done. And that shift from hypothetical to real changed everything. She'd been planning to confess conditionally. Based on my reaction to her hypothetical question, she'd decide whether to admit the affair or continue hiding it. But I didn't answer her hypothetical. I recognized it for what it was, a test, a preparation, a way to manage my response before revealing the truth. So I asked the real question instead. And the 8 seconds of silence before she answered told me everything. She wasn't asking hypothetically. She was confessing without confessing, testing whether it was safe to admit what she'd already done. Some people said I was cold to interrogate my own wife, but those people don't understand behavioral analysis, don't recognize that when someone asks, what would you do if, they're not being curious or philosophical. They're telling you something happened, and they're gauging whether you can handle knowing. Jessica asked what I'd do if she cheated. I asked what she'd already done. She wanted to control how I found out. I took that control away by refusing to play the hypothetical game. Because hypothetical questions about real situations deserve real questions in response. She wanted to confess on her terms. I made her confess on mine. And the truth she revealed, 2 months of lying, 6 times sleeping with someone else, dozens of texts and secret meetings, was exactly what her hypothetical question had been hiding. She asked what I'd do. I showed her.